Video games take a long time to develop. Sometimes they take a really, really long time to develop. And over the last year or so, we've seen the release of several games that spent bloody ages in development hell. But what exactly is development hell, and is it ever worth the wait?
With Prey due to release on May the 5th, we thought it would be worth having a look at the long and storied development that the game has gone through. Originally, the game was known as Prey 2, a sequel to Prey 1 on the PC and 360 back in 2006. It was being developed by Human Head Studios and published by 3D Realms, and the original concept was vastly different than the Prey we'll be getting in a month's time. Prey 2 would have put players in the role of a bounty hunter, charged with tracking down and arresting criminal aliens, similar to how bounties worked in Red Dead Redemption. Rockstar's game was in fact a big influence according to Human Head Studios, but after years of transferring rights and stunted development, Prey ended up in the hands of Bethesda, who announced the game again in 2011 with a trailer, but after that the game disappeared again. Then in 2016, Bethesda announced Prey from Arcane Studios, a complete reboot of the series with almost no trace of the original left.
Yeah, so Prey 2 looked awesome. I don't understand who looked at that game and went, nah, let's not make that. But this is an example of one particular type of development hell, where a game is effectively scrapped and then you get a completely different game. They just start again. The only thing that stays true through the whole process is the fact that there's another Prey game coming. That's the only fact that's related to either of them, because it's a completely different game. It's a new team working on it. It's a new idea built from the ground up. So this is a particular type of development hell where it starts out as one thing and you get something completely different.
So apparently Bethesda bought the rights to the Prey franchise, and then they completely scrapped all the original idea and rebooted the first original game. What gets me is, why didn't they just make a new game and call it something other than Prey, not buy the rights, and just like make a space game where there's a space station and neuromodels? It doesn't make sense. Like, why waste the money?
That's actually a really good point, because it's not like Prey has got real selling power. I mean, people kind of remember it as being, that's about it. It's you might as well start with a new IP in that case. So it is interesting. It's pretty weird.
But you are right what you said. That trailer for Prey 2 looked amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't want to play that game? Who?
Of course, Prey is still in development, but there have been some massive games in recent times that finally released after as much as 10 years of development. Final Fantasy 15 and The Last Guardian, just to name a couple. Final Fantasy 15 first emerged as a very different game back in 2006. Originally called Final Fantasy Versus 13, the game was a world away from the open-world adventure we eventually got. The concept was much darker. Noctis was portrayed as an anti-hero, and his royal family acted more like a mafia family rather than nobles. After years of delays, reboots, and even a change of directors, Final Fantasy Versus 13 was rebranded as Final Fantasy 15 and released in November 2016. Final Fantasy 15 received strong reviews across the board, and the majority of critics and fans agreed it was a good game despite the extended development time and doubts surrounding its actual release. But to this day, the game is still getting patches that add huge chunks of content, story details, and even completely reworking several gameplay mechanics.
The Last Guardian was also announced in 2006 for release on the PS3, but after numerous delays and silence surrounding the game, many people gave up hope of ever actually seeing it on the shelves. But at E3 2015, Sony surprised everyone by announcing The Last Guardian had moved to PS4 and had an actual release date to boot. The Last Guardian finally released on December 2016 after spending 10 years in development. During this time, the original development studio actually disbanded, and a new studio headed up by the game's original creator was brought on to help finish the game. It was released to positive reviews with a Metacritic score of 82, but the most common complaint was the graphics and gameplay, which reviewers said were reminiscent of the PS2 era and that the game felt dated on release. So two examples of how development hell can actually result in a game. They actually got a game at the end of this.
Despite those criticisms about both those games, Final Fantasy is still getting some patches and still a lot of work being done on it post-release, and The Last Guardian being a little bit dated, they're still generally good games, and that's after a huge, tumultuous kind of development period. So it shows that a development hell can really result in some good games eventually. And the story around The Last Guardian is quite interesting as well. So Ueda, the guy from Team Ico, the guy created all these kind of games, Shadow of the Colossus and Ico, he fell out with Sony because of creative differences. He left, and the studio Team Ico kind of disbanded. He created a new studio along with some Team Ico people, and then Sony hired them to make
to finish the game.
to make Last Guardian, to finish it off. So those kind of creative differences, those arguments that, when you've got that amount of people and that huge team, all these creative talents working on one big project, different aspects of these big projects, it can easily spiral out of control, and that's clearly what happened with The Last Guardian. But the proof's in the pudding. The game does come out eventually, and it turns out to be quite a critical success, so that all these problems can resolve themselves over time. It just takes a hell of a long time in some instances. That's where the development hell kind of thing comes from.
These games are obviously successors to previous titles. So the people who played and loved the original games might have been anticipating these games for ages and ages, and they might have lived every single minute of those 10 years waiting for these games. Imagine if a game like Red Dead Redemption 2 was delayed for 10 years. We'd be pulling our hairs out by now. So you can kind of sympathise with the people waiting for these games, and eventually, thankfully, they got the game they were waiting for.
But while the likes of The Last Guardian and Final Fantasy XV eventually made a success of their development hell, some games turn out to be massive disappointments. After spending an unbelievable 15 years in development, the world finally saw the release of Duke Nukem Forever in 2011, and oh boy, was it shit. After changing developers and game engines about 5 times, Gearbox bought the rights to the Duke Nukem franchise and assisted Triptych Games in finally releasing Duke Nukem Forever. But on release, the game was criticised for technical issues, outdated jokes, and just stale gameplay. By this point, the gaming press already lost hope for Duke Nukem Forever, and most fans agreed the game would just never live up to the hype. And the bottom line, after 15 years of development hell, Duke Nukem sits at 49 on Metacritic.
And then, of course, there's Aliens Colonial Marines. Famously, one of the shittest games ever. Development on Colonial Marines began in 2001 under Fox Interactive Entertainment for the PS2 and Xbox, but everyone went silent and no one heard a thing about the game for a while. Then in 2006, Sega acquired the rights to make the games based off Aliens, and then resumed development on Colonial Marines, but this time it was being handled by, you guessed it, Gearbox. Colonial Marines was meant to be a tactical co-op shooter akin to Rainbow Six, but what we got was far worse. Worse than anyone could have imagined. The final product was a shitty Call of Duty clone with aliens in it. It looked nothing like the original concept, and some people even filed a class action lawsuit against Sega and Gearbox for false advertising.
How bad is your game? Class action lawsuit bad. So that's how it can really go badly wrong. Gearbox providing 2 shining examples for us there. Thanks, Gearbox.
Shining polished turds.
Oh, yeah. So these games are the complete opposite of Final Fantasy and The Last Guardian, really. They just stumble at every turn, and it's more about misleading and things like that, especially in the case of Aliens Colonial Marines. That is famously one of the most, shining examples of misleading before a game comes out.
I'm thinking maybe, did Sean Murray ever work for Gearbox? There's a No Man's Sky.
Might be a future there for him, though.
I think a lot of this comes down to corporations and rights to intellectual property. The fact that they're selling assets to other people, and it's not about the game, it's about how much money they've got in their concept and just passing it on to somebody else who then take up the mantle and try and do what they can with their imagination. It's like, well, whose original idea was it? Everyone's visions get clouded. It draws out the process, and there's no one clear vision for the game. And then also, down the line, where you're expanding your scope of the game, that could add years and years on to the end of the game. And you end up with something, I don't want to say Star Citizen, in case I get lynched in the comments like I did last time. But, it's that kind of thing.
I don't think they're watching our videos anymore, mate.
Thankfully. It's that kind of thing where you keep adding, like, this would be awesome if this was in the game, and then it takes an extra few months for this idea, that idea. It causes problems with your publisher because you're stretching out. Oh, we didn't budget for these ideas.
Exactly.
But would you want a good game, or do you want a game that's going to be released earlier that's not going to do so well? So it's a balance between creativity and making money, and it's the development
that's
publisher.
Exactly it. Just such a big creative project, making a video game. There's so many parts of projects that can fall through. That's why we get delays. But when it becomes a development hell thing, it's a combination. For me, I think it's usually going to be a combination of that creative fragility, I suppose, and the corporate bloating, like, we can't handle this, we're just going to put the rights to this game on sale, someone else will buy it, reset the whole process, start making the game again. That's when it goes from being delays to being development hell. This is taking forever.
So Prey may not be the game it was going to be when it first started out, thanks to development hell. But Me, someone take that trailer and make a game out of it.
So what's the longest you guys have been waiting for a game? Have you followed a game all the way through development hell? Let us know how you felt about it down in the comments. Remember to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Check out more of our content right here, and there's a link to Patreon if you want to support the channel. We'll see you next time.
We should have a theme tune, Mike. Ready to go gaming, we're so cool. Come on, Mike, join in.